February 23rd, 1945, Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima. A private first class, Tadashi Yamamoto crouched inside a concrete bunker, his hands trembling as he wrote words that, if found by his superiors, would mean execution. The Marines are not ordinary men. They do not die like others. Everything we were told about American weakness was a lie. Through the narrow gun slit, he had just witnessed something that overturned everything he had ever been taught. 6 Marines charged his position under relentless machine gun fire. 3 fell instantly, yet the others pressed forward. When his comrades hurled grenades, 1 Marine threw himself onto the explosion to shield his squad, then fought on despite horrific injuries until he could no longer lift his weapon. Within minutes, the survivors captured the position. There were 21,000 Japanese soldiers on Iwo Jima, entrenched in a vast network of 18 kilometers of tunnels and bunkers. They had been told the Americans were weak, soldiers who would crumble under real pressure. Instead, they faced an enemy that shattered every belief the Imperial Army held. This miscalculation wasn't written in strategy documents, but in the brutal close-quarters combat that left 26,000 Marines dead or wounded in only 36 days, Japanese confidence had already begun to unravel long before Iwo Jima. August 7th, 1942, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, a veteran of the China campaign where Japan had seemed unstoppable, wrote in his diary after the first week of fighting, "The Americans we face here are unlike any enemy we've known. They do not retreat even when surrounded. They do not surrender even when defeat is certain. Most unnerving of all, they fight in the dark as if night gives them strength, not fear." Guadalcanal marked Japan's first defensive battle in the Pacific, and the Imperial Army expected an easy victory over inexperienced American troops. The 1st Marine Division that landed numbered just over 16,000 men. Japanese intelligence had described the Marines as elite, but still American, soft products of a comfortable democracy that prized the individual over the group. Within days, every assumption fell apart. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome led a reinforced company ordered to retake Henderson Field on the night of August the 20th. His 200 men had crushed Chinese forces 3 times their number before. They advanced confidently, believing the Americans would panic in the dark. But the Marines waited in carefully planned defenses with interlocking lines of fire. Fukudome's company walked straight into a death trap. Then something occurred that violated all Japanese tactical doctrine. The Marines counterattacked immediately into the darkness, their automatic weapons firing with deadly precision. Fukudome's diary, recovered after his death 3 days later, captured his disbelief. "They attacked us in the night. We are supposed to be the ones who attack at night. They moved through jungle we thought impassable. They killed without a sound and vanished again." By sunrise, only 90 of my men remained. The Americans lost 12. This same pattern unfolded all across Guadalcanal. Japanese troops, used to enemies collapsing before their banzai charges, found Marines who held their ground until overrun, then fought on hand-to-hand with bayonets, knives, and bare fists. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, who survived 4 brutal months on Guadalcanal before evacuation, wrote in a letter later intercepted by American intelligence, "We were taught that Americans are selfish, unwilling to die for each other. That is false. I saw a Marine gunner keep firing with both legs shattered until our soldiers killed him at arm's length. His assistant instantly took over the weapon, and I kept firing. We lost 40 men trying to silence that one gun. The kind of training that produced such men baffled Japanese analyst Private Yamamoto, who would later fight the Marines on Iwo Jima. First heard about them during intelligence briefings in 1943. The instructor, a staff officer who had interrogated captured Marines, spoke with unease. American Marines endured training that would be seen as cruelty in any civilized army. They are broken down mentally and physically, then rebuilt into something unrecognizable from the civilians who entered. They are taught to see death in battle as honorable, to never surrender, and to fight until they can no longer move. Sound familiar, doesn't it? They've taken our Bushido, but fused it with something we never expected: American industrial might. That combination proved catastrophic. Japanese soldiers bound by the Bushido Code were prepared to die before surrendering, yet they fought with weapons that grew increasingly outclassed by American firepower. Marines endured training nearly as punishing as our own, forging warriors just as willing to die. But they brought overwhelming weaponry that made Japanese defenses untenable. November 20th, 1943, Tarawa Atoll. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki commanded 4,500 men in fortifications believed to be unbreakable. The 2nd Marine Division shattered that belief in just 76 hours. Private First Class Tadashi Ogawa, one of only 17 Japanese survivors, told interrogators what he saw. The first wave was slaughtered in the surf, hundreds dead, then came another. The second wave died on the beach, and still more arrived. The third wave reached our lines with flamethrowers. They kept coming until either we were dead or they were. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 6,400 men died on Tarawa in just over 3 days. The surviving Marines had proven they would seize any target, no matter the cost. Captured documents from Saipan in 1944 described Marines as shock troops displaying fanatical dedication to objectives. They refuse retreat orders and launch counterattacks even when the situation is hopeless. Losses among Marines, one report noted, do not reduce combat effectiveness until the entire unit is destroyed. This conclusion came from systematic analysis Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, a Guadalcanal survivor, compared the two American forces. The U.S. Army fights using conventional, predictable methods. The Marines do not. They advance relentlessly, ignoring casualties. They accept loss rates that would make any rational commander stop. It was unprecedented. The speed of Marine offensives proved as destructive as their firepower. Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, who commanded on Peleliu, built his defenses assuming Americans would halt to regroup after landing. The Marines never did. They came ashore on September 15th at 0830 and held half the airfield before nightfall. Nakagawa's diary captured his disbelief. My defensive plan collapsed because it assumed the enemy would act logically. The Marines do not act logically. They fight with total reckless commitment. To Japanese observers, this seemed suicidal. Yet it was devastatingly effective. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, captured on Bougainville, recalled watching a Marine platoon charge a fortified hilltop. The approach was wide open, covered by 3 machine gun nests. Japanese tactics would have demanded heavy artillery and smoke cover first. But the Marine lieutenant studied the terrain for less than half a minute, then ordered an immediate assault. They charged straight into the gunfire. 7 men fell in seconds. The rest stormed the first bunker, destroying it with grenades and charges. 3 more fell, taking the second. The survivors, 5 men left, captured the third. In total, 12 Marines out of 37 died seizing a position we considered untouchable. The entire battle lasted 4 minutes. This wasn't mere bravery. It was the deliberate use of acceptable losses to secure objectives faster than we could react. The very concept horrified Japanese officers trained to see soldiers' lives as sacred within mission success. Marines, on the other hand, treated casualties as the cost of victory, a price they paid without hesitation if the goal was worth it. That mindset created a psychological edge even greater than their material advantage. Knowing the Marines would accept 50% losses to take a position left Japanese commanders with no good choices: defend lightly and lose the ground, reinforce and expose another front, abandon it and concede territory. Every choice led to defeat. The only variable that remained was Time Major Yoshitaka Hori, a senior staff officer on Iwo Jima who survived the battle, analyzed this grim equation during post-war interrogations. General Kuribayashi, he explained, had understood from the start that stopping the Marines was impossible. Our defenses were designed not to defeat them, but to delay and bleed them dry, and in that we succeeded. Devastatingly so. Over 20,000 Marines were killed or wounded in 36 days. For any other military, such losses would have ended offensive operations entirely. Yet the Marines kept coming, reinforcing and attacking without pause or loss of momentum. We believed that causing 10,000 casualties would halt their advance for at least a week. They lost that many men in the first 7 days, and still, they never slowed. That was when the true imbalance became clear. The Americans could replace their losses faster than we could. They had nearly 50 Marine divisions either fighting in the Pacific or training back home. We had only limited defenders on each island. The mathematics alone ensured our defeat, and those numbers extended far beyond manpower. The Marines brought logistical power unlike anything we could match, a machine that sustained combat at a level no Japanese force could endure. Second Lieutenant Toshio Yamamoto, captured on Saipan, saw it with his own eyes during a nighttime reconnaissance. I led a patrol to observe American positions 3 days after their landing, he said. We expected to find exhausted soldiers running low on food and ammunition, as we would have been after such fighting. Instead, we found Marines eating hot meals, receiving ammunition by truck, medics tending to the wounded, and rest areas for troops rotating off the line. Their supply depots, he said, held more ammunition than his entire regiment. They had mobile kitchens serving fresh food, portable showers, even laundry stations. They were waging the most intense battle of the Pacific War, and living better than we did in peacetime garrisons. That sight proved one thing beyond doubt: defeating them was impossible. The Marines would never run out of supplies, medicine, ammunition, or reinforcements, but we would. American logistics turned the war into a contest of endurance, one they were built to win, even though they suffered higher initial casualties. Their constant flow of supplies and replacements made every battle tilt in their favor. Japanese defenders, confined to bunkers and caves with no resupply, faced permanent losses. Every bullet fired was one that could never be replaced. The Marines, meanwhile, fought from an ever-growing beachhead, supplied daily by sea and air. Their wounded were evacuated, their ranks replenished. The longer the battle dragged on, the stronger they became, while we grew weaker. This imbalance proved decisive on Peleliu, where Colonel Nakagawa's defense stretched from September 15th to November 27th. The 1st Marine Division suffered such heavy losses that it had to be withdrawn and replaced by the 81st Infantry Division in October. A 2nd Marine Division fought on until the Army took over completely. A battle planned to last 1 week dragged into 11. The Japanese defenders inflicted more than 10,000 American casualties, but the Americans could afford those losses and still keep fighting. Japan could not afford to defend every island at such a price. The arithmetic no longer worked. By mid-1944, this reality had reached Japanese command intelligence reports sent to garrisons, quietly admitted that Marines could no longer be stopped, only delayed. One document, captured on Tinian, revealed a complete surrender of any illusion of victory. It read, "When facing a Marine assault, do not expect to hold your position indefinitely. The purpose is to delay the American advance long enough to achieve other strategic goals. Every day of resistance has value. Every Marine killed or wounded has value. But understand me, the position will fall. Prepare for that. Stockpile all possible ammunition, build fallback positions, fight in stages. Accept that you will likely die in defense of the island. Your death will buy time for the Empire. There is honor in sacrifice, even without victory." This grim logic became the foundation of Japan's final year of defense in the Pacific. The goal was no longer to win battles, but to make them so costly that the Americans might choose negotiation over invasion. But the Marines, by accepting losses that would have broken any other army, shattered even that hope. They paid the terrible price demanded of them and kept moving forward. No sacrifice was considered excessive. No fortification seemed impregnable. The attack never ceased. Private Tadashi Ogawa, a rare Tarawa survivor, later recounted the mental toll of confronting such an adversary. "After the first day, we realized defeat was certain. The Marines had come ashore with overwhelming force. They brought naval bombardments that annihilated our defenses. They had continuous airstrikes that kept us under siege. Yet we clung to the belief we could impose such terrible losses that future invasions would be reconsidered. Then we watched them keep advancing despite appalling losses. They walked into machine gun fire that cut dozens down. Still more Marines arrived behind them. We killed many of them as well. More kept coming. For 3 days we fought with complete resolve. We inflicted thousands of casualties. We perished nearly to the last man, and yet the Marines captured Tarawa on schedule. They bore the cost we demanded and pressed their campaign across the Pacific. That was the moment we grasped the war was lost. An enemy willing to pay any price to win cannot be stopped by making victory costly. This understanding spread through the Japanese ranks as survivors carried their lessons from one engagement to the next. By the time Marines landed on Iwo Jima in February 1945, every defender recognized they faced the most unrelenting foe in the Pacific. They knew death awaited them. They knew the Marines would seize the island. The only uncertainty was how many Marines would fall beside them. General Kuribayashi's defensive strategy accepted these facts and was built around them. His orders to soldiers admitted what propaganda denied. "We cannot prevail in this fight. We can only force the Americans to bleed for every inch. That is our duty. Accept death. Inflict casualties. Slow their advance. In this way, we serve the Empire at its bleakest hour." This judgment proved true again and again. February 19th, 1945, D-Day Iwo Jima became the most exhaustive Japanese study of Marine capabilities. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, perhaps the finest defensive commander Japan deployed in the Pacific, spent months analyzing Marine methods and constructing defenses tailored to counter them. His preparations were remarkable. But before Iwo Jima validated Kuribayashi's designs, Marine raiders had already shown abilities beyond ordinary excellence. These elite teams executed deep penetration raids that spread fear far beyond their numbers. Japanese forces discovered raiders operated at night with devastating effect. Colonel Kiyono Ichiki learned this lesson fatally on Guadalcanal in August 1942. His 900 men, victorious against Chinese formations through aggressive night assaults, had assumed Americans feared darkness. Ichiki planned a textbook nocturnal attack on Marine positions along the Tanaru River. Raiders from the 1st Marine Raider Battalion waited in prepared emplacements. Ichiki's troops waded the river shortly after 0100 on August 21st. The raiders opened point-blank automatic fire, supported by pre-registered artillery. The engagement lasted 20 minutes. Japanese losses exceeded 700 killed. Marine losses were 35. The raider units were later absorbed into regular Marine divisions in 1944, but their tactics spread throughout the Corps by Iwo Jima. Ordinary Marine infantry employed techniques the raiders had pioneered. Night patrols probed continuously. Small teams exercised independent initiative communications, enabled unprecedented coordination. The result was an enemy that fought round the clock with an intensity Japanese forces could not match. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who fought on 3 islands before capture at Okinawa, summed up the ordeal. The Marines never ceased. Daytime assaults with crushing firepower, night infiltrations by small units slipping into our lines, constant artillery harassment that denied rest, airstrikes during daylight hours. We endured non-stop pressure from landing to defeat. Traditionally, Japanese troops held the night and rested after daytime battles. Faced with the Marines, there was no respite. There was nowhere left to recover. There was never a safe moment. Combat ran non-stop until we were dead or taken prisoner. This was industrialized warfare, executed without mercy. The industrial scale of Marine operations both intrigued and horrified Japanese military thinkers. Whereas Japanese forces depended on morale and individual self-sacrifice to make up for shortages, the Marines applied overwhelming force methodically to every challenge. Confronted with a reinforced strongpoint, they did not depend on bravery or cunning. They spotted the emplacement, summoned artillery that poured hundreds of shells into it, advanced tanks equipped with flamethrowers to flush surviving defenders, and then sent infantry to seize the ground. If resistance persisted, destroyer and battleship gunfire would pulverize the area. The systematic annihilation was appalling in its precision. Second Lieutenant Saburo Endo, an artillery forward observer on Saipan, observed Marine combined arms procedures during the June 1944 invasion. His diary contained careful notes. Warships laid down covering fire for 3 hours before the first landing craft hit the shore. Aircraft pounded our positions for 2 hours before the assault. When Marines went ashore, every move was backed by tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, and airstrikes. They advanced deliberately and methodically, leveling everything in their way. When our prepared positions temporarily held, they called for battleship salvos that literally removed hills from the map. They did not try to beat our positions by courage or clever ruses. They used sheer, overwhelming force to destroy the defenses and then moved in. This is not the sort of warfare we understood. It was industrial-scale destruction, applied relentlessly until resistance was impossible. We fought with rifles and light machine guns. They fought using the resources of an entire industrial nation. Endo's notes reflected what many Japanese soldiers realized too late. The Pacific War was not a proving ground for warrior spirit or superior tactics. It was a clash between Japan's narrow industrial base and America's vast production machine. The Marines were the spearhead of that machine, soldiers trained to exploit American advantages mercilessly while accepting losses that were made replaceable by numbers and replacements. Against such an opponent, Japanese bravery and skill counted for nothing. The result was mathematically decided from the outset. Only how long and at what cost remained uncertain. Kuribayashi forbade the Banzai charges that had squandered lives in earlier fights. He built a depth defense that funneled Marines into kill zones, ringed with multiple bunkers. He sighted artillery to hammer the landing beaches. He excavated 11 miles of tunnels, linking 1,500 cave positions. Every approach was pre-sighted for mortar and artillery fire. The beach became a death trap. 3 Marine divisions, some 70,000 men, landed on Iwo Jima on February 19th. Kuribayashi's preparations performed exactly as intended. Naval shelling barely nicked the fortifications. Marines came ashore in ordered waves and immediately suffered catastrophic losses. Within minutes, the black volcanic sand was strewn with the dead and wounded. Japanese artillery observers brought down perfectly timed fire. The assault appeared to be collapsing. Then what Kuribayashi had failed to expect occurred. Though earlier battles should have warned him, the Marines did not fall back to reorganize. They pressed into the barrage. They discovered gaps between our positions and exploited them. When bunkers stalled the advance, demolition teams crawled forward under fire to breach them. When those teams perished, others stepped in. The attack never stopped. Private First Class Tadashi. Yamamoto watched from his bunker as Marines assaulted the emplacement on his right. His diary captures the bewilderment of Japanese defenders. A Marine flamethrower crew moved up to the bunker. We killed the operator. His assistant grabbed the nozzle and kept firing. We killed him too. A third Marine seized the weapon and, though badly hit, kept on. He fired until the tank ran dry, then hurled grenades into the firing slits until we killed him. By that time, demolition engineers had reached the bunker mouth. The position was lost. This happened 30 times in the first hour. How do you stop men who simply will not stop? The Japanese defenders discovered the answer. You don't. The savage arithmetic of Iwo Jima revealed Marine doctrine in its purest, most terrible form. 70,000 Marines landed. 26,000 became casualties. Nearly 7,000 killed. Every one of the 21,000 Japanese defenders died, save for 1,016 who were captured. Most only because they were unconscious or too badly wounded to resist. The Marines paid an almost unimaginable price, but they captured every objective. Kuribayashi himself, who survived until late March 1945, sent one final message to Tokyo before his position was overrun. The Marines are the most effective fighting force I have ever encountered. They possess several attributes that make them uniquely dangerous. First, their training produces soldiers willing to accept casualties that would break other units. Second, their firepower exceeds ours by a factor of 5 to 1 in artillery and 10 to 1 in air support. Third, their junior leaders make tactical decisions at squad level that our officers make at company level, allowing them to exploit opportunities faster than we can respond. Fourth, and most crucial, they never stop attacking. There is no defense that can withstand this combination indefinitely. That final observation struck terror into Japanese defenders across the Pacific. They could accept defeat in battle. They could understand being outgunned or outmaneuvered. What they could not grasp was an enemy who refused to stop, no matter the losses. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who had fought on 3 islands before his capture on Okinawa, explained in a post-war interview, You must understand the difference between Marines and other American forces. Army units would attack, take casualties, and pull back to reorganize. That is sensible military doctrine. Marines would attack, take casualties, and keep attacking over the bodies of their own dead. This is not military doctrine. This is something else entirely. The quality that made Marines so feared was not an accident. It was created deliberately, through training designed to destroy and then rebuild recruits from nothing. Captured documents on Saipan included an interrogation report of a Marine prisoner who explained this process to puzzled Japanese intelligence officers. Boot camp lasts 8 weeks. For the first 4 weeks, the drill instructors destroy everything civilian in you. You are told you are worthless, that you'll never be a Marine, that you should quit and join the Army. The abuse is psychological and physical. You are pushed until you think you can't go on, and then pushed further. Those who quit are publicly shamed. Those who stay learn that surrender is not an option. The Japanese officers noted that this sounded similar to their own training. But as the prisoner continued, they realized there was a critical difference. In the second 4 weeks, the instructors build you into a Marine. You learn that you are part of something greater than yourself, that every Marine who ever lived is your brother. To fail is to betray every Marine who has ever fought. This psychological transformation forged a unique warrior identity, one that compelled Marines to advance when reason said stop. Japanese troops encountered this mindset in its most concentrated form during Banzai charges that should have succeeded, but instead ended in catastrophe. On the night of October 24th to 25th, 1944, on Saipan, Colonel Takuya Takashina led roughly 3,000 Japanese soldiers in a final Banzai assault against Marine positions. Japanese doctrine taught that such an attack, executed with total commitment, would shatter any defense through sheer ferocity and the enemy's fear of being overrun. The Marines of the 27th Infantry Division were mostly asleep when the attack struck at 0300 hours. Japanese soldiers flooded into the Marine lines, screaming, bayonets fixed, overwhelming the forward outposts by sheer numbers. Traditional doctrine would have dictated a fighting withdrawal to regroup. The Marines did the opposite. They counterattacked immediately. Officers and sergeants rallied men into desperate strongpoints. They used every weapon available: artillery firing at point-blank range, rifles, grenades, and trench knives in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The fighting lasted 4 hours. When dawn came, Japanese bodies lay in a swath half a kilometer deep. American losses were 90 killed and 247 wounded. 3,000 Japanese soldiers were dead. Private First Class Takeshi Yoshida survived the charge badly wounded. His interrogation, conducted 3 days later, captured the shock that many of our soldiers felt. We had been told Americans fear close combat, that they depend on firepower because they are cowards. We stormed their lines expecting them to break. Instead, they fought us hand to hand and defeated us. I saw a Marine sergeant drive a bayonet and fire a pistol until he had killed 7 men before he fell. This was not cowardice. We had been lied to. Falsehoods extended to every claim about Marine capabilities. For years, Japanese propaganda painted Americans as soft, individualistic people unable to endure hardship. Yet Marines, sleeping in water-filled foxholes, eating cold rations for weeks, and fighting in 100-degree heat with 80% humidity, proved those claims false. Soldiers supposedly forged for hardship watched Marines thrive in conditions that pushed Japanese endurance to the limit. Corporal Kenji Matsumoto, who survived Guadalcanal before being transferred to Bougainville, where he was captured in February 1944, described the contrast. By September 1942, our rations were reduced. Rice twice a day, sometimes less. We supplemented our diet with anything edible we could find in the jungle. We watched Marines eat 3 full meals a day, sometimes more. Resupplied regularly by air and sea, they had fresh water, medical supplies, and effectively limitless ammunition. We realized we were fighting an enemy who would not run out of resources. That realization broke something in us. The material advantage Marines enjoyed was overwhelming. When facing fortified bunkers, they called in artillery that delivered hundreds of shells in minutes, brought forward Sherman tanks fitted with flamethrowers, and used naval gunfire capable of leveling hills. If those measures failed, demolition teams planted hundreds of pounds of explosives against positions Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome, before his death on Guadalcanal, wrote what became the most thorough analysis of Marine combined arms tactics captured during the war. The Marines do not fight as isolated soldiers. They fight like components of a single machine. Riflemen pin our positions. Machine gunners suppress our fire. Mortarmen lay smoke to blind our observers. Artillery breaks our bunkers. Tanks roll forward with infantry close behind. Aircraft bomb any target artillery cannot reach. This coordination takes place within minutes of contact, orchestrated by junior officers using radios we did not possess. We could not match that tempo. By the time our commanders grasped the situation and issued orders, the Marines had already moved to exploit the gap. That speed was possible because Marines pushed decision-making to the lowest level. Sergeants made choices that Japanese doctrine reserved for captains. Corporals led assaults that would have required a lieutenant's authority in our army. The result was an enemy that adapted faster than our forces could respond. When a bunker stopped a Marine advance, a sergeant would immediately redirect the attack along a different axis while calling in supporting fires, all without waiting for orders from above. Japanese defenders often found themselves fighting enemies who appeared from unexpected directions because Marines had identified and exploited weaknesses before commanders recognized their existence. The most feared Marine weapon was not the rifle or the artillery. It was the flamethrower. Soldiers taught to accept an honorable death discovered that fire offered no honor. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, captured on Okinawa, with burns over 40% of his body, described the psychological effect. We were taught that death in battle, by bullets, bayonets, or shells, is glorious. Fire is different. You watch the flames advance on your bunker. You smell comrades burning alive. You hear the screams. There is no glory in that death. It is industrial slaughter. This is what the Marines understood, and we did not. Modern war leaves little room for glory. It is about killing the enemy as efficiently as possible, using the best tools available. By 1944, this realization had come too late for most Japanese defenders. Every soldier in the Pacific understood that facing Marines meant confronting the deadliest combination of training, equipment, and doctrine America could field intelligence reports circulated among garrisons, described Marines, with a mix of respect and fear that bordered on superstition. One captured document, taken on Tinian in July 1944, offered detailed guidance for defending against Marine assaults. The report acknowledged truths that contradicted decades of Japanese propaganda. First, Marines are physically larger and stronger than Japanese soldiers, a result of superior nutrition from childhood. Second, Marines are supplied with more ammunition, better weapons, and more reliable equipment than Imperial Japanese Army troops. Third, the training emphasizes marksmanship to a degree unmatched by Japanese forces. The average Marine rifleman can hit targets at distances beyond our soldiers' reach. Fourth, Marines operate with air and naval support beyond our ability to counter. And fifth, most critically, they are trained to see surrender as unacceptable. They fight to death or victory. There is no middle ground. The report then offered tactical advice that revealed the depth of Japanese despair. When facing Marines, do not expect them to retreat. Do not assume casualties will weaken their morale. Do not believe numerical superiority gives you an advantage. Their firepower cancels it out. Avoid banzai charges unless there is absolutely no other option, because Marines will annihilate charging troops with automatic weapons and artillery. Do not expect them to fear night attacks. They fight effectively in darkness. The only effective defense is prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire, multiple fallback points, and the recognition that the position will ultimately fall. The goal is not to stop the Marines, but to inflict the maximum casualties before defeat. This doctrine acknowledged reality, but offered no path to victory. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, preparing Iwo Jima's defenses in early 1945, understood this perfectly. He wrote to his wife in January, 1 month before the invasion. I am tasked with defending Iwo Jima against American Marines. This is a mathematical problem with only one solution. 70,000 Marines will land. They will control sea and air completely. They will bring unlimited ammunition and supplies. They will attack until Iwo Jima falls. My mission is not to defeat them. That is impossible. My mission is to make them pay such a terrible price that America will reconsider invading the home islands. Every day they remain engaged buys the Empire time to prepare. Every Marine killed is one fewer enemy in the final battle. Kuribayashi's strategy reflected the evolution of Japanese defensive doctrine, from confident aggression to desperate attrition. The Marines who landed on Iwo Jima on February 19th faced defenses designed not to repel them, but to bleed them in ways meant to sap American resolve. Every bunker required a direct assault. Every cave entrance was covered by multiple firing positions. Every meter of ground cost lives to take. The strategy failed because it misunderstood Marine culture. High casualties did not break their morale. They reinforced it. Every fallen Marine demanded vengeance. Every brutal day of combat strengthened survivors' determination. The harsher the fight, the harder the Marines pushed. This was incomprehensible to Japanese thinking, which assumed that even the most fanatical soldiers had a breaking point. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto, who survived until March 10th, wrote his final diary entry the night before his death. Tomorrow, the Marines will reach this position. We have killed hundreds over the past 3 weeks. More arrive every day. They do not weaken. They do not slow down. They do not stop. I thought our spirit was stronger than American materialism. I was wrong. The Marines have both spirit and material. They have courage equal to ours, combined with weapons and supplies we cannot match. They are what we claim to be. We are what we claim they were. This is the truth we die knowing. The next morning, his bunker was destroyed by a Marine demolition team after a 6-hour battle that killed all 11 defenders and wounded 3 Marines. The position delayed the Marine advance by exactly 40 minutes before other units bypassed it, while combat engineers reduced the bunker. This brutal pattern repeated across Iwo Jima thousands of times. Japanese defenders fought with desperate courage, inflicting terrible losses, yet achieving nothing but their own deaths. The campaign ended on March 26th. The final numbers told the story of what occurred when Marines met the best defenses Japan could assemble. 21,000 Japanese defenders died. 1,016 surrendered, most because they were unconscious or too wounded to resist. The Marines suffered 26,000 casualties out of 70,000 committed, almost 40% casualties. Any other army would have needed months to recuperate. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions were back in action within 6 weeks. That capacity to take losses and keep fighting became the defining trait that terrified Japanese defenders. Corporal Kenji Matsumoto, held in Hawaii after capture, explained in a 1946 interview what Japanese troops felt confronting Marines. The worst part was knowing they would never quit. You could kill half a Marine unit, and the survivors would keep attacking. You could wound officers, and sergeants would assume command. You could wear them down, and they would assault again the next day. There was no way to win. You could only kill them until they killed you. That is not war. That is mutual annihilation, and the Marines had more men than we did. American industry that produced wave after wave of replacement Marines stunned Japanese planners. Late 1944, intelligence noted Marine divisions had suffered 75% casualties on Peleliu in September 1944, and yet returned to full strength within 3 months. Those replacements landed on Iwo Jima in February and fought as effectively as veterans. This capacity to regenerate shattered Japanese expectations. The Imperial Japanese Army had no equivalent training system, no replacement pipeline to preserve unit quality. While absorbing catastrophic losses, American efficiency touched every element of Marine operations. Wounded Marines received treatment within minutes. Evacuation by air and sea moved injured men from the line to hospital ships in hours. Blood plasma, antibiotics, and surgical care saved lives at rates unprecedented in military history. Japanese wounded often died for lack of medical supplies, from infected wounds, from injuries American medicine routinely healed. Captured Japanese watched Marines who should have died from wounds instead recover and fight again. The final humiliation came after Japan's surrender. In August 1945, Marines occupied the home islands, expecting resistance from a populace taught to die rather than yield. Instead, they found exhausted civilians grateful the war was over. Private First Class Takeshi Yoshida returned in 1946 after recovering from Saipan wounds, described coming home. Everything we had been told was lies. The Marines did not torture prisoners. They provided food, medical care, shelter. They treated us better than our own officers had. The Americans were not barbarians. This shattered what remained of our faith in the empire. Thousands of former soldiers reached the same conclusion. Post-war interrogation reports revealed consistent themes: respect for Marine fighting qualities and bitterness at Japanese leadership that had lied about American capabilities. Recognition grew that the war had been hopeless from the start because Japan could not match American industrial output or the combat quality of units like the Marines. The most complete appraisal came in General Tadamichi Kuribayashi's final message from Iwo Jima, transmitted by radio on March 21st. 5 days before the island fell, he wrote that he had fought the Marines for 31 days. They are the finest soldiers I have met. Their training is superior, their equipment overwhelming, their courage equals ours, and their numbers are endless, Japan cannot defeat such an enemy. We can only die fighting them and hope our sacrifice buys time for peace talks that preserve something of our nation. To my fellow officers preparing to defend the home islands, know this: the Marines will come. You cannot stop them. You can only make them pay in blood for every meter. Perhaps if the price is high enough, they will negotiate rather than destroy everything. That is our only hope. That hope died with the atomic bombs in August. But Kuribayashi's judgment about the Marines proved true. This was real. They were the point of the spear that broke Japanese defensive lines across the Pacific. They paid an enormous price, with casualty rates that would have destroyed weaker organizations. But they never broke, never retreated, never relinquished an objective. They were exactly what Japanese propaganda had claimed the Imperial Japanese Army was: invincible fighters who would die before accepting defeat. The ultimate irony was that Marines achieved this through rigorous training and overwhelming material backing, not through mystical martial spirit or racial claims. They showed that modern war required both courage and industrial capacity, both training and technology, both personal sacrifice and national resources. Japan had courage and training. America had everything. The Marines embodied that combination in a manner no other American unit matched. Japanese veterans acknowledged this distinction. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, interviewed in 1975 as an old man, summed up what his generation learned fighting the Marines. We were taught spirit conquers material, that our will to die made us invincible. The Marines taught us that spirit plus material beat spirit alone. They were as ready to die as we were, but they had Sherman tanks and naval gunfire, limitless ammunition, air superiority, medical care, food, and all America's resources behind them. We had our rifles and our courage and promises of triumph. That was not enough. It would never be enough. The Marines proved that on every island they seized. The statistical record confirms this conclusion. Marines fought in every major Pacific campaign, from Guadalcanal in August 1942 to Okinawa in June 1945. They incurred 86,000 casualties, including 19,500 killed. But they never failed to seize an objective, never abandoned a position once captured, never gave Japanese forces cause to believe the Marines could be toppled by superior tactics or fighting spirit. The price was terrible. The results were definitive. Japanese military analysts studying Marine operations after the war reached unanimous conclusions. The Marines were the ultimate expression of American military power. They fused a warrior ethos akin to Japanese Bushido with industrial resources matching American production capacity. They trained soldiers prepared to die for victory while equipping them with weapons and support that made victory achievable. This pairing was unbeatable. The lessons arrived too late for the 21,000 Japanese soldiers on Iwo Jima, the 30,000 who faced them on Okinawa, or the hundreds of thousands who prepared to defend the home islands before surrender ended the war. Those men knew only that the Marines were the enemy they feared most, the foe their officers could not halt, the force that would keep coming regardless of casualties until every defender was dead. Private First Class, he wrote, "The Marines will win, not because they are braver than we are, not because they desire victory more than we do. They will win because their nation supplies everything they need, and they will use those resources without mercy until we are all dead." This is the truth our leaders should have told us. We are samurai with swords, fighting men with machine guns, who also possess the samurai spirit. There was never any hope. There was only death. His bunker fell the next day. The Marines who cleared the bunker found his diary and forwarded it to intelligence officers, who translated it and filed it among thousands of similar records. The words captured a truth Japanese soldiers across the Pacific had learned through brutal experience. Fighting the Marines was unlike fighting other American forces. It was not like fighting British, Chinese, or any other enemy. It was fighting an opponent who combined all that Japan claimed to possess with all that Japan lacked. That mix made the Marines the most feared enemy Japanese soldiers would face. Statistics tell part of the story, the battles tell more, but the testimony of survivors reveals the complete picture. They fought men who would not stop, who would not surrender, who would die rather than accept defeat, and who had the weapons and support to make that spirit lethal. Against such an enemy, courage was insufficient. Training was insufficient. Determination was insufficient. Nothing was enough except surrender or death. The Japanese military chose death. The Marines delivered it with systematic efficiency. That is why Japanese soldiers feared fighting the Marines more than any other unit. The Marines declared they would take the objective, and they did. They said they would accept any cost, and they paid it. They never stopped. Japanese defenders discovered that courage meant nothing when facing an enemy who matched their resolve and exceeded their firepower by margins that rendered resistance futile. That was the lesson learned in blood from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. After the war, and when propaganda faded, Japanese veterans acknowledged the truth their leaders had hidden. The Marines were everything Japan claimed its soldiers to be, backed by everything Japan could never provide. Against such an enemy, the war was lost before it began. The Marines proved it utterly, island by island, at a cost of thousands of lives on both sides. In short, the truth is stark and simple. Modern victory depends on a fusion of spirit and material strength, and when a nation supplies both without hesitation, the outcome is often decided before the battle truly begins. Survivors recounted this again and again. Historians and analysts later confirmed it. The lesson is clear and bitter. Valor alone cannot substitute for resources, organization, and medical care. This is a lesson paid for in blood. It must be remembered and taught, so future generations understand full cost and the true reasons for victory, and never forget those lessons.